All right, welcome. Today we're diving into a story from the Bible that honestly feels like a total contradiction. We're talking about a holy war that was fought on the holy day of rest. So, how on earth can violence lead to peace? Let's get into it.
Here's the plan. We're going to look at the divine timing of this whole thing, the unlikely heroes God chose to lead it, the insane paradox at the very heart of the story, what it all teaches us about what rest really means, and finally, the incredible peace it created. So to really get this story, you have to understand the timing, because in the Bible, timing is, well, it's everything.
For 6 long years, the kingdom of Judah was in a really dark place. This illegitimate queen, Athaliah, she'd grabbed power, tried to wipe out the entire royal family, and just filled the land with idolatry and chaos. It was a really, really bad time.
But then, the seventh year arrived. Now, in the Bible, the number 7 is like a divine signature. It means completion, fulfillment, and, you guessed it, Sabbath rest. This was not just another tick on the calendar. This was God's appointed time to make a move. And the scripture is so specific about this. It kicks off the whole chapter with these exact words. In this 7th year, Jehoiada strengthened himself. Just that simple phrase is this huge flashing sign. It's telling us that what's about to happen isn't just some political coup. It's a divine intervention. It's about restoring God's order.
So, how does the priest Jehoiada even start a revolution like this? Well, who he picks as his allies is so fascinating, and it shows us this key strategy God uses over and over. I mean, think about it. Logically, you'd go straight to the top military dogs, right? The commanders of thousands. They've got the power, the influence, all the troops. But Jehoiada, he does the complete opposite.
He totally bypasses the senior leadership. I mean, after 6 years under a corrupt queen, they were probably compromised, or just lazy and complacent, or way too high profile to make a move. Instead, he goes to the commanders of hundreds, the middle managers. These were the guys who were still connected to the people, they were agile, they were faithful, and, they could fly under the radar.
This is a classic biblical pattern. We call it the strategy of the remnant. It just goes to show you that God's work so often isn't done through the big and powerful, but through a small, faithful, kind of overlooked group of people who are willing to be courageous. And who did these commanders go get? The text tells us they gathered the Levites and the heads of the Israelite families. This was no ordinary army. It was a coalition of priests and community leaders, a spiritual and civil uprising all in one. Now, this unconventional army, they had an even more unconventional plan. Their strategy wasn't just about who was involved, but when it was all going to go down. On the Sabbath, the holiest day of the entire week. This, right here, raises a huge theological question. Is it even okay to wage war on the Sabbath, the one day God set aside for complete rest? I mean, on the surface, it looks like a massive contradiction. Just get this picture in your head. Inside the temple, you've got the Levites, the priests, and they are armed for battle. Their normal sacred duties are replaced with military ones. It's an image that just seems to violate the entire spirit of Sabbath peace. And their mission was spelled out with deadly seriousness. The scripture commands, the Levites are to be stationed around the king, each with his weapon in his hand. Anyone else who enters the temple is to be put to death. Their job was to protect the true king, the little boy Joash, who represented the entire future of God's covenant. They were literally a human shield, and those weapons were for defending life. And listen to this detail. It is so important. The verse says they armed themselves with weapons that had belonged to King David and were in the temple of God. See? They weren't using new worldly weapons. They were taking up these old stored instruments of faith, weapons that had been dedicated to God and were now being used to restore his kingdom. Okay, so how do we make sense of all this? A war on the day of rest? To get it, we really have to redefine what true, godly rest actually is. There is a world of difference between a passive, legalistic kind of rest, which is really just about not doing stuff, and the dynamic, restorative rest that God is all about. One is just inactivity. The other is about restoration. This whole event gives us this powerful new idea, what we can call active rest. True Sabbath isn't just about stopping your work. It's about actively working to fight the chaos, the evil, the disorder that stands against God's peace. It's the holy work of saving life. And don't think this is just some weird Old Testament thing. Centuries later, Jesus himself confirms this exact principle. When the religious leaders get on his case for healing on the Sabbath, he asks them this piercing question: which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill? Jehoiada and his priests were answering that very question with their swords. Saving the king's life? That was the ultimate Sabbath work.
So what was the outcome of this radical Sabbath day war? What did all this active rest actually accomplish? Well, the victory wasn't just political, it was this deep spiritual cleansing, and it happened in two critical steps. First, the source of all the chaos, Queen Athaliah, she was taken out decisively. And second, with the evil gone, the nation's relationship with God could be formally renewed.
Jehoiada then made a covenant that he and the people and the king would be the Lord's people. That's the real goal of the whole revolution. It wasn't just to change the person on the throne, but to restore the nation's identity as belonging to God. And the final result. The chapter ends with these beautiful words: "So all the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was quiet." You see, true peace, real shalom, it didn't come from just passively ignoring evil. It only came after evil was confronted and the covenant with God was restored.
So true rest, it turns out, isn't about avoidance. It's about restoration. It's the active work of bringing God's order into all the chaos of our world and in our lives. And that really leaves us with a final question to chew on. What chaos-creating Athaliah in our own lives needs to be confronted so that we can find that true God-given quiet?